Okay, I'm going to briefly explain the schema that was the most valuable to me when I was learning physiology. I have another video on it, but it was like an hour long, and I wanted something more short and more accessible. So I'm just going to be brief with this one. So this is the framework that I'm trying to show. Blood versus lumen. You see I have blood versus air, blood versus pee, and blood versus food. This is basically the framework that I would use for almost every organ system in physiology. Of course, there are some systems not included here, but this is basically PULM, renal, and GI. So, yeah, like maybe not all of them have whatever. Anyways, the idea is that I had a much easier time when I realized all of these systems in particular, their physiology is all about things moving back and forth between two sides. One side is always the bloodstream, and the other side is the lumen that corresponds to whatever organ system you happen to be talking about. Lumen meaning empty space or an empty tube. Just like your blood vessel is a tube full of blood, the other side will be a tube full of blank. You fill in the blank based on the organ system. The important thing to remember to help tie this together is that I like to say the blood is the most important organ in your body. Your blood is the only organ that affects all the other organs the most because it supplies them. So, if you get bacteria in your blood, that's called bacteremia, and that's now a systemic problem, not a local problem. Systemic meaning it's going to affect your whole body. When you put oxygen in your blood, which is the goal here, that's going to go to your whole body. So whether something's good or bad, if it ends up in your blood, it ends up in your whole body. So I like to say your blood is you. Your blood basically determines what's going to happen to your whole body. And I like to say that your patient is their blood. That's why when we're taking labs, we always check the blood level of the thing we're looking for, whether it's sodium, potassium, all the electrolytes, cells, all sorts of things, right? We check their blood level because the blood is what's going to tell us everything about the patient. So now I'll get into the actual specifics a little bit. Blood versus air just means that in PULM, the two sides are the bloodstream versus the alveolar lumen. So there's a lot of terms that we use for this, like the A gradient, meaning the gradient between the alveolus and the artery, right? Air, blood. We also talk about ventilation and perfusion with the VQ scan or the VQ gradient, right? Ventilation means moving air, and perfusion means moving blood. So ventilation happens exclusively in the alveolar space. It has nothing to do with blood. Perfusion happens exclusively in the blood vessel space. It has nothing to do with air. And then diffusion, right, is how you get to a different place. It's the bridge between perfusion and ventilation. It's the bridge between blood and air. So if you have this way of splitting the PULM stuff up and see how all those terms go into these two buckets, it's very helpful to simplify it down, break it down, and remember what's going on. Next up is renal, blood versus pee, I like to say. What it really means is the bloodstream versus the renal tubule, or the renal tubular lumen. So you have your electrolytes going back and forth. Good things that your body likes, like sodium, are going to go into your blood. Bad things that your body doesn't like as much, like acid, H+, or potassium. Yeah, you need some, but I still think of it as bad because your body likes to get rid of it a lot. Creatinine and BUN. As an overarching rule of thumb, those things are generally going out into your pee. So again, it's all about these two sides trading things back and forth across them. Blood versus pee. Blood versus a lumen. Lastly is the GI physiology. Blood versus the GI tract. Similar to the renal one. in that you're just trading things back and forth. One key thing that sometimes trips people up and used to be an issue for me is the word absorption always means going into the blood. That is consistent. And then secretion always means going into whatever the other thing is, the thing that's not the blood, right? So to absorb means to take something into yourself, right? So if you are your blood, and then the things that are not blood are just not you, they're the outside world, then that's why we remember that absorption always means going into the blood. You may have heard that your GI tract is technically not part of your body because it's continuous with the outside world, meaning it starts at your mouth, which is an open space, then it goes all the way through and it ends at your anus, which is open space. So if something goes into your mouth and goes all the way through your GI tract and out your anus, it technically never actually went into your body. It's when it passes from the GI tube into the blood vessel tube, that's when it actually is inside your body, when you absorb it into the blood. So that's because the GI tract is open at both ends. It's technically part of the outside world. So when things go into that tract, we don't call it absorbing, we call it secreting, because we're not taking it in, we're putting it out. With the renal tubule, it's not continuous with the outside world on both sides, but it's kind of continuous on the bottom if you kind of think of it as the pee is going to go all the way out your bladder and your urethra to the toilet. And then with the air, it's kind of continuous with the outside world at the top because, the air comes in through your mouth from above before going down to your lungs. But anyways, that's the idea. Blood versus lumen.